Last year, I happily got married after a long search among numerous candidates. Finally, I settled on a simple village girl, Evgenia. She came from a small village located 200 kilometers away from the city where we met, fell in love, and eventually settled down after our wedding. I married late, at the age of 36, having spent most of my adult life lost in the haze of nightclubs and the allure of Russian Finnish baths. The girl who came into my life was a delight for both me and my parents. Evgenia was quiet and modest, only 18 years old. I was twice her age. From the very first glance, I was captivated by her beauty and grace. As I got to know her better, she seemed like a sweet and genuine person. From the start, Evgenia kept all the other girls at arm's length. I had heard about her devout mother and her strict alcoholic father, and I remember the pastoral simplicity that enveloped my love as soon as she returned to her hometown. She viewed my proposal as an act of goodwill and love towards her forgotten ancestors. My wife's feelings were evident. She almost suffocated me in her embrace. Loading the car to the brim with gifts for her relatives, we set off for her village for a return visit. Her parents had only visited us once, and that was at the wedding. Evgenia's mother, Alevtina Ivanovna, was not an ordinary woman. She was only 38 years old. On our very first day together, we encountered a small mishap. When we were introduced, according to Russian custom, we kissed 3 times in the air, touching our cheeks. One of us awkwardly turned, and the last kiss landed on the floor. Alevtina Ivanovna, as if nothing had happened, went to the kitchen to unpack the bags, while I stood there frozen, unable to shake off the embarrassment for a long time, hiding my feelings from everyone. Bringing a case of whiskey with me, I hoped to unwind like an adult. I spent my vacation in the hallway, where her parents greeted me, Alevtina Ivanovna and Evgenia's father, whose name was Gavrila. I could never remember his patronymic. He was heavily intoxicated and, as usual, didn't recognize me. My mother-in-law, Alevtina Ivanovna, warmly embraced me and presented her lovely face for a kiss. Afterward, she calmly stepped back, smiled at me, and went to the kitchen with her daughter to sort through the gifts. I was astonished by the effect this woman had on me. I hurried to my wife with a burning desire to let off steam during the feast, where a bunch of previously unknown relatives had gathered. I tried to clink glasses with Evgenia's mother, but she insisted I should not call her that. After another round, she surprisingly went along with it each time. What struck me as strange wasn't just the open flirtation between my wife and me, but the complete lack of reaction from the relatives and guests around us. It felt as if this was a standard form of interaction for the people surrounding me, or perhaps they simply didn't see anything inappropriate in it. Evgenia, watching all this, seemed oddly amused. Maybe she thought how wonderful it was that her beloved had found common ground with her mother. After the feast and the guests had left, I decided to take a shower and wash off the journey. Comfortably nestled in the spacious shower stall, which could easily accommodate a small rhinoceros, I turned on the water and let it cascade over me. I didn't hear the bathroom door open, but I distinctly heard my mother-in-law's voice behind me. "Need a back scrub?" "No, thank you, Alevtina Ivanovna," I called out, trying to keep my back turned to her. "Come on, don't be shy," she replied cheerfully. Suddenly, I felt her strong hands behind me with a washcloth, and in that moment, I felt like a baby in my mother's arms. A long-forgotten sensation. "Mom, oh thank you so much," I murmured, leaning into the warm embrace, planting a kiss on her hand as a sign of gratitude. Then, I dissolved into a cloud of shampoo and warmth. In the following days, I encountered my mother-in-law in the most unexpected places. Sometimes in the bathroom while she was hanging laundry, other times in the kitchen washing dishes, milking cows in the barn, or in the garden feeding chickens. Her husband was hardly around. He existed in a parallel universe, and I never managed to have a meaningful conversation with him. My life in the village consisted of long days riding my bike, meeting friends, and disappearing into the unknown, allowing both myself and my mother-in-law some freedom. She started to enjoy this playful dynamic, and slowly, she began to remind me more of her daughter. I found myself reluctant to leave this hospitable home, which felt increasingly like my own. The last nights of our stay in the village flew by in a blur, leaving only pleasant memories of my mother-in-law. On our final day, the women were busy packing for the journey ahead. I lounged in the anteroom, face down in a bowl of cat food, blowing bubbles through my nose, while I indulged in the comfort of my bed, preparing for sleep after a refreshing shower. I had just begun to doze off when I felt a gentle nudge on my shoulder. It was Alevtina Ivanovna, my mother-in-law, perched on the edge of the bed, looking at me with affection. "You're leaving tomorrow," she said, noticing that I had opened my eyes. "Today is your last night here." Before I could respond, she lowered her gaze, leaned in, and gave me a soft kiss. I raised my head in disbelief, and to my shock, I saw my wife standing in the middle of the room, equally stunned. A ringing sound echoed in my head, and I imagined the fury my wife would unleash upon me. I squeezed my eyes shut in fear. Alevtina Ivanovna noticed Evgenia and choked on her words, then quickly grabbed my wife's hand, pulling her out of the room. "We need to talk," she said in a strained voice, as I anxiously tossed about in bed, debating whether to jump out the window or barricade the door. The two women re-entered the room like a funeral procession. "I know everything," Evgenia said in a flat voice, and I shrank beneath the covers, pulling my head into my shoulders. "I want to thank you for what you've done for my mom," my wife said, a warm smile suddenly spreading across her face, reminiscent of the time she had done the same for me. "And I'm not angry, darling." I was taken aback, staring at her in confusion, struggling to comprehend the meaning of her words. Meanwhile, Alevtina gently guided my wife to the bed, and suddenly, the lightness of the moment faded. They lay on either side of me, my two women close together. The next morning, I woke up much later than usual, around 1 o'clock, with no memory of how we had fallen asleep. When I opened my eyes, they were gone. I jumped out of bed, washed up, and peeked into the kitchen. There sat my two women, calmly sipping tea. When they saw me, they exchanged shy glances and smiled. I smiled back in response. In the hallway, as we prepared to leave, Alevtina looked at us with a mix of regret and sadness. "It's a shame you're leaving. I've really enjoyed having you here," she said, hesitating before finishing her thought. "Well, come visit us sometime," I replied, hugging my wife. "We've enjoyed it too, Alevtina Ivanovna." "Where am I going?" she replied with a touch of melancholy. "Too many things to talk about," said Evgenia, leaning against the doorframe at an awkward angle, her tone teasing. As we drove away from the village, Evgenia's phone rang. She quickly read the message, her eyes lighting up. "Guess what?" she said, looking at me. "What's that?" I asked, intrigued. "It's from my mom," she replied. "I've been urgently summoned back to the city. I'll be there on the 3rd and staying with you. That's in 2 days," she added, stretching luxuriously. As I raced down the highway at full speed, leaning out the window, I yelled, "Alevtina, I love you. Like and subscribe to the channel. Wishing everyone happiness and health."